Hi there, my name is Rob and I specialize in health and nutrition videos. And today I want to talk to you about how to avoid getting sick during pandemics and epidemics such as COVID and other ones that go around. Stay tuned to the end of the video because by the end of the video you will possess a powerful technology that, if you have the discipline to follow, can not only help you keep you healthy during a pandemic or an epidemic, but healthy in the presence of disease-causing bacteria and viruses generally. So whenever a pandemic or an epidemic or any bacterial or viral infection such as the common cold or the flu is going around, what really influences whether you will get sick or not is whether or not your immune system is functioning properly. Now, there are millions of disease-causing bacteria and viruses around us at all times. This is true regardless of whether there's a pandemic or not. Disease-causing bacteria and viruses are present at all times. So whether you get sick or not depends on how well your immune system is functioning at the time. So now in reality, most of the bacteria and viruses that have the propensity to make us sick are actually no match for a properly functioning immune system. So even when smallpox and other epidemics were going around, there were people who got smallpox and got really sick and really badly and died. Now, there are other people who got smallpox and got really sick but didn't die. And then there's some people who got smallpox but got moderately sick and didn't die. And then some people who got smallpox and they got only mildly sick and they didn't die. And of course, there are some people who were exposed to the smallpox virus but they didn't get sick at all. This is true of COVID, it's true of the flu, and it's true of bacterial and viral infections generally. So the difference between all of these was how well the person's immune system was functioning, and that determined the severity of the infection and whether or not that person would require hospitalization and whether or not they would survive or not. So the first thing I want to do is I want to alert you to a study that was written about in a book called Goldo. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. It was by Junkyo Yasui and Louis E. Cook Jr. It was written about 1978. Now, you can probably get this book through Amazon, but even if you Google it, you can just find out the part of the book that we will be talking about for this discussion. Now, in this book, they talk about a study that was done where scientists had experimented on 3 groups of rats. The first group of rats was fed a fully raw food diet of just fresh, raw, uncooked fruits, vegetables, nuts, and grains, all uncooked. The second group of rats was fed a diet comparable to that of the average American diet, and included white bread, cooked foods, meat, milk, salt, soft drinks, candies, cakes, vitamins and other supplements, and different medications for all their health issues. Now, a third group of rats was fed the same diet as the second group, so the standard American diet, to an age equivalent to about 40 years old in humans. Now, at the end of the period that was equivalent to 40 years in humans, all the rats in this third group then received the raw food diet of the first group of rats and lived on that for the second half of their life, so up to an age that would be equivalent to about 80 years old in humans. So this book goes on to say that the first group of rats that were fed the raw food, from the time they were born, they grew into completely healthy specimens. They never, suffered from any kind of disease. They were never ill. They grew rapidly, but they never became fat. They mated with enthusiasm, and they had a healthy offspring. They were always gentle. They were always affectionate and playful, and they lived in perfect harmony with each other. Now, on reaching an age equivalent to about 80 years old in humans, the rats were put to death and they were autopsied. At that advanced old age, their organs, their glands, their tissues, they didn't appear to have any signs of aging or deterioration. The second group of rats, which were fed the equivalent of the modern American diet, first of all, they became very fat and from the earliest age contracted most of the diseases of modern American society, including colds, fever, pneumonia, bad eyesight, cataracts, heart disease, arthritis, cancer, and a lot of other ones. They also died prematurely at early ages, but during their lifetime, most of them were always vicious and snarling and constantly fighting with each other. They would steal each other's food and they would try to kill each other. They actually had to be kept apart to prevent them from killing each other. and their offspring were also all sick and exhibited the same general characteristics as their parents. Now, the part that is really interesting and really relevant to this video is that this group of rats all died one by one from different diseases in epidemics of various diseases. So, meaning that the standard American diet food rats basically succumbed to various epidemics that were going around, while the raw food rats didn't. Now, that's the part of this study that's really interesting and relevant to us, which I really want to get back to, but please let me just briefly explain what else happened to this group of rats and the third group of rats, which had the standard American diet for the first half of their life and then nothing but raw food for the second half. So now the autopsies were performed on this standard American diet rats, and what they revealed actually extensive degenerative conditions in every part of their bodies. All their organs, their glands, and their tissues were affected, as were their skin, their hair, their blood, and their nervous system as well. So they were actually apparently all complete physical and nervous wrecks. The same conditions existed in the few which survived the full duration of the experiment. Now, with the third group of rats, the ones that were on the standard American diet for the first half of their life, and on the completely raw food diet for the second half of their life, during the first half of their life, they displayed all the same types of symptoms as the second group, the ones that were on the standard American diet. They were very sick, and they were very vicious towards each other all the time, and they had to be separated from each other to prevent them from killing each other and stealing one another's food. Now, within 1 month of the switch from the standard American diet to the completely raw food diet, their behavioral pattern had changed completely. So that now they were docile, they were affectionate, they were playful, and they were able to live together without being separated. And from this point onward, they never suffered from any illnesses as well. So a few of the third group of rats were put to death and autopsied at the end of the first period that corresponded to 40 human years, where they were on the standard American diet. And they actually had the same deterioration of their internal organs, glands, and tissues that the second group of rats, the ones they ate the standard American diet, had. This is obviously expected since they both had the same diet. But here's where it gets interesting. So the remaining rats in the third group, where they switched from the standard American diet to the raw food diet, lived out the full duration of the experiment to the equivalent of 80 years old in humans. And when they were autopsied, there were no signs of aging or deterioration or disease in their internal organs and tissues. So their internal organs didn't have the decay of the standard American diet rats. And so we're just like the rats in the first group, which were the raw food rats. The disease, the degeneration, and deterioration of their internal organs that were so evident in the first half of their life had been completely reversed, and excellent health restored after being on the raw food diet for the second half of their life. So what this shows is that eating healthy or eating raw food can reverse disease in rats. But let's get back to the second group of rats. So many of them got sick and died in various epidemics that swept through their colony, while this didn't happen to the raw food rats. So this is very interesting because it shows that rats that ate the standard American diet succumbed to the epidemics and pandemics, while raw food rats apparently didn't. So that's interesting, and I'm going to tell you now about another scientist named Francis Pottinger, who I talked more about extensively in my raw food video. Now, during the 1930s, Francis Pottinger did an experiment on cats that lasted 10 years. He actually had 3 sets of cats. So he gave one set of cats the one-third raw meat and then 2/3 raw unpasteurized milk. Now he gave another group of cats 1/3 raw meat and 2/3 cooked meat. And then he gave the third group of rats 1/3 raw meat and 2/3 pasteurized milk. So now the raw meat and raw unpasteurized milk cats, they stayed in excellent health and rarely ever got sick. But the cooked meat and the pasteurized milk cats all came down with all the health problems that human beings commonly suffer from. The standard ones that are not bacteria or virus related, such as allergies, thyroid disease, arthritis, and a whole host of other ones, but also ones that are related to bacterial and viral infections, such as coughs, colds, fevers, hepatitis, pneumonia, bronchitis, meningitis, and osteomyelitis as well. I actually talk more in detail about Francis Pottinger and his famous cat experiments in my raw food video, which I highly urge you to watch. There are literally dozens and dozens of experiments such as these that were done in the past And I go through a lot of them more in that raw food video. So please watch it to learn more about the health benefits of eating raw food. What these two experiments and all the other experiments like this that I talked about in my raw food video show is that eating more of your food raw rather than cooked can give you resistance to epidemics, not just to coughs and colds and bacterial and viral infections in general, but to other viruses and bacteria that happen to be going around. So I just want to say also that I know it's obviously very difficult to eat 100% raw food, especially in a society that would find this diet very strange. And of course, it's hard to break habits. So what you can do is you can slowly increase the amount of fresh fruit and vegetables in your diet, and slowly decrease the amount of cooked foods. When you do this in a slow transition, it becomes much easier to do than if you were to do this all at once. Even I don't eat a completely raw food diet. I eat about 80 to 90% of my food raw, and then the rest cooked. Because in our world this would be very difficult. But I gradually came to this percentage slowly over a period of time. So I couldn't do this all in one shot either. Now I'm just used to eating like this, and it's just become normal for me. But it was a gradual transition for sure. But basically, the more you do, the better. I do want to say, however, that the one type of cooked food you should really stay away from more than anything else that will greatly reduce your susceptibility and severity of bacterial and viral infections is fried foods. Obviously, deep fried foods are the worst, but even pan-fried foods should be avoided. This is because heating oil in the presence of oxygen creates all kinds of carcinogenic compounds, which contribute greatly to destroying the ability of your immune system to function properly. And so fried foods greatly increase your susceptibility to bacterial and viral infections. Another thing that actually affects your resistance, not only to bacterial and viral infections, but also COVID, is your vitamin D levels. An incredibly large percentage of all the people who got sick during COVID were actually vitamin D deficient. Now, vitamin D deficiency is linked to practically every disease out there. I personally use vitamin D to control my eczema. My eczema actually goes away during the summer when I'm in the sun all the time, and it comes back in the winter when there's no sunshine. So what I do now is I take vitamin D supplements. I actually start them right in September, so I start them right away, and I do this all throughout the winter, and that's cured actually my eczema on my fingers. That appears to be seasonal. So vitamin D, lack of vitamin D affects a lot of things. But the reason that people get the flu and other bacterial and viral infections more in the winter is because of the lack of sunlight in the winter, which causes vitamin D deficiency, which runs down your immune system and leaves you open to all kinds of bacteria and viruses, which would normally be no problem for your immune system to handle if it were working properly. But because of this lack of vitamin D, it isn't. As well, the sunshine you get in the winter in a non-tropical climate is not very potent. It has limited vitamin D making potential. So during the summer, it is important to get lots of sunshine every day. But if you live in a non-tropical climate like I do, I live in Vancouver, it's important to take vitamin D supplements during the wintertime. Your body can easily handle about 4,000 IU international units per day without any toxicity resulting from it. Personally, at the time of taping this video, I take about 6,000. And I appear to be doing fine. So there's a few other things that affect your immune system negatively too, which are alcohol, lack of sleep, and processed foods. White sugar, white flour, and even white rice can reduce your immune system's effectiveness at fighting off bacteria and viruses that enter your body. White sugar is by far the worst culprit. In fact, it's safe to say that white sugar is one of the biggest contributors to disease generally that's out there and is responsible for the vast majority of sickness in society. So you should avoid it like the plague. So when I talk about white sugar, though, I'm just talking about the white refined granulated sugar that's been processed and bleached with a lot of chemicals. So I'm not talking about the natural sugar that is found in fruits and honey or in maple syrup or in products, even sugarcane, things that are found naturally. So just the refined granulated white sugar. It's the processing that it goes through that makes this product bad for you, for your health. This is the sugar that's found in candy, in chocolate bars, that people add to their coffee, that's in donuts, and it's even added to foods not traditionally considered sweet, such as spaghetti sauce. So it's always important to read the ingredients list on any packaged food you buy to make sure there is no sugar added to it. So I'm just going to briefly explain some incidents in history that illustrate how bad sugar really is. So back in 1665, the bubonic plague was sweeping through England. At this time, sugar consumption literally went from 0 to 16 million pounds per year in 2 centuries. And eating white sugars was very common in large cities, but it wasn't very common in rural areas. So in September of 1665, about 30,000 people died from the bubonic plague in London, where white sugar consumption was very common. But in the rural countryside, where eating sugar hadn't caught on yet, bubonic plague was virtually non-existent. So this shows that the consumption of white sugar contributed greatly to people catching and dying from the bubonic plague. As well, in the 1700s, deaths from tuberculosis increased dramatically in England, and were the highest among sugar refinery employees. In 1910, when the Japanese acquired a cheap and abundant sugar source in Formosa, which used to be what Taiwan was called back then, incidences of tuberculosis rose dramatically. So as you can see, both the bubonic plague and tuberculosis are diseases that are caused by pathogens, like bacteria or viruses. But whether you get sick or not is heavily influenced by the consumption of white sugar. I would also suggest avoiding white flour, and white rice as well, as they also have a similar effect in the body. Eating too much white rice can result in vitamin B1 deficiency, so I would suggest switching to brown rice. White flour, because it's refined, is also something you should avoid. So when you read the ingredients list on a package, white flour will read just as flour or enriched flour. These just mean refined white flour, so those are the same thing. Another big contributor to catching coughs, colds, the flu, and other viral and bacterial illnesses out there is alcohol. So drinking alcohol is one of the worst things you can do to your body. It reduces your immunity to such a degree that alcoholics routinely catch all kinds of strange and weird bacterial infections that people who don't drink don't catch. One of the biggest times for catching the flu is right after the major holidays in the wintertime, namely Christmas, but especially New Year's Eve. These are both nights when people do a lot of partying and a lot of drinking, and cases of the flu go right up after these 2 holidays, especially New Year's Eve. The hospitals always see an influx of people with the flu right after the holidays, and a large part of it is because of the drinking that goes on during that time. So add on top of that the fact that you are staying out late until the early morning hours, so you're also wrecking your sleep as well. And in addition, it's during the winter so most people are vitamin D deficient. So avoiding alcohol goes a long way in keeping your immune system up and can help to stop you from succumbing to bacteria and viruses generally, including ones that are circulating during a pandemic or an epidemic. So the last thing I want to talk about is sleep. So lack of sleep is a huge factor when it comes to catching a bacterial or viral infection. So it's important to get lots of sleep every night. For most people, this is about 8 hours, but it can be a little more or less depending on the person. So there are a lot of things that affect sleep and sleep quality, and I actually made a whole video about sleep that I urge you to watch. Here in this video, though, I will just go over a few points. So getting enough sunshine greatly affects sleep. So getting sunlight in your eyes during the day affects your circadian rhythms and helps to regulate your sleep. As well, the vitamin D that is made from sunshine actually helps you to sleep better by affecting your intestinal flora in your intestines, which causes them to make more B vitamins, and this helps your sleep a great deal as well. Another thing that affects your sleep quality is salt consumption. So table salt is also a refined food, so you should avoid it as much as you can. Now, if you insist on using salt, you can switch to sea salt, but you should also try to minimize this as well. Too much salt of any kind can really contribute to keeping you awake at night. You do need both sodium and iodine in your diet, but you should try to get sodium from green leafy vegetables, celery, tomatoes, and other sources. And iodine you can actually get from pineapples, strawberries, bananas, and other sources as well. The most obvious elephant in the room when it comes to sleep is caffeine. Now, almost everyone knows that caffeine keeps you awake, and this is the reason that people drink coffee or tea to be alert during the day, obviously. But what people don't know is that caffeine consumption generally affects sleep quality, meaning that it takes a long time for all the caffeine to completely leave your system. And for this reason, caffeine doesn't just affect your sleep if you drink it at night or in the evening, but if you drink it generally. Drinking coffee or tea affects sleep quality in general, and so you should avoid it. In order to stay alert during the day, you should just try to get lots of sleep at night, so to make sure that you're alert during the day. So cutting out tea and coffee is probably the hardest on this list for most people. But you must try to do this in order to get better sleep and increase your resistance to bacterial and viral infections. Another thing that you should do is unplug your Wi-Fi when you sleep. This also affects sleep quality also. You're not using it when you're sleeping, so there's no reason to keep it on, and the radiation from Wi-Fi can affect sleep quality as well. As well, you want to make the room dark, the room that you're sleeping in, dark in the evening. Darkness in the evening affects melatonin production in your body, and that triggers sleep as well. So sleep in a completely dark room if possible. Personally, I use a sleep mask to block out any lights coming from the street lights outside. Also, go to sleep early enough that if you are awakened in the middle of the night and can't fall asleep for some length of time, you have some time that you can afford to lay awake for a while before falling asleep again. Make sure that if you have to go to the bathroom or drink water in the middle of the night, that you do so, because if you are thirsty or you have to pee or poo in the middle of the night, this can cause you to stay awake as well. I found that for myself personally, that eating a more raw food diet also affects sleep quality. So for me, raw food helps health conditions generally, but also helps me sleep better. And better and more rested sleep helps your immune system greatly, and in essence helps to protect you not only from COVID and other pandemics and epidemics, but bacterial and viral infections in general. Anyway, I just want to say a few other things before I wrap up this video. You may be surprised at the information I gave you at the beginning of this video about the raw food studies, and you're probably wondering why your doctor has never brought this up before, or why your doctor doesn't know this. Well, the answer to that lies in the financial incentives that are involved in medicine. There is really no way to patent something like raw food and sell it as a product. So you'll notice, for example, that when you go to the zoo, you may see a sign saying not to feed the ducks, or saying what things are acceptable to feed them and what aren't. Like it may say, for example, that you can't feed them bread, but you can feed them grapes. You may be surprised to learn that in the 1920s, for example, in order to cut costs, zoos started feeding restaurant scraps to the zoo animals. But what ended up happening is that the zoo animals ended up getting sick, so they actually had to switch their feed back to what they would normally eat in the wild. So naturalists and zoologists know that when animals eat human food, they end up getting sick. So this information has been around now for decades, but it's simply not taught in medical school, because there is no way to patent and sell raw food as a drug to cure an illness. But that doesn't mean it doesn't work. And the reason it does work is because it's the lack of raw, uncooked food that causes the illness in the first place, along with all the other things I mentioned, in this video. Raw, uncooked foods have enzymes in them that actually facilitate their digestion, and that cooking actually destroys. And cooked foods have a lot of the vitamins and the minerals destroyed due to their sensitivity to heat. In addition, a lot of the protein in cooked foods becomes denatured, making them unusable by the body, whether that body be animal or human. You have to remember that doctors are in the medicine business, not in the health business, and approach it from that angle. When you go to the doctor, you tell him your symptoms. He names what disease you have based on what symptoms you tell him, and he prescribes the appropriate medicine for that particular ailment. But it's not the lack of that medicine in your body that causes the illness in the first place. It's all the stuff I mentioned earlier in this video. So if you get all that stuff in line, your susceptibility to all kinds of illnesses, including bacterial and viral infections, should decline greatly. Now, the information that you have gotten in this video is a very powerful technology that you can use to ward off illness. And now that you have it, all you really need is the self-discipline to follow it. And if you have that, then you're golden. You should notice that the amount and severity of bacterial and viral infections goes down greatly. And the more you follow it, and the stricter you get with your diet, sleep, sunshine, and lifestyle habits generally, you may notice that you can go indefinitely without getting sick, or at least extremely long periods of time. Another thing I want to say is that the other thing that having this knowledge has given me, besides good health, is that I have lost my fear of germs and bacteria that I once had. I'm no longer as worried about germs, and I'm much less of a germaphobe than I was in the past, when I used to catch coughs, colds, and all kinds of bacterial and viral infections constantly. Now, I hardly catch anything at all, and if I do, it's very mild, so I'm not as paranoid about all the chronic hand washing and sanitizing and distancing that people are doing right now during the pandemic. As I have, I have less of a fear of it than most people, and that truly has been a remarkable blessing. Well, that's all I have for today. If you liked this video and you found the information useful and informative, please click like on the video and subscribe to my channel as well. Also in the comment section, please share your stories about health and health issues. If you have had health issues in the past, please talk about those and let me know what you did to overcome them. Or if you have any questions, please ask them in the comment section. Once again, my name is Rob. My videos are basically about health and nutrition. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.